Good morning and welcome to this week's discussion, or Jump's discussion, on managers, the most influential people in the business. Over the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've had some really good webinars on building your business, and we heard Neil Carberry last week talk about getting closer to your clients and things that are going to happen this year. And I think the part of that is you've got to start to think about who's the people, who are the catalysts. So this week we're going to look at the reason why your managers, and at any level of manager, are the catalysts for good performance and bad performance. So let's look at some of the stats to sort of get an idea of how influential managers are and what they do. So Gallup found that a staggering 70% of every employee motivation is influenced by their manager. That's 70% of every employee's motivation is influenced by their managers. Employees are 3 times more engaged when they receive daily feedback from their manager versus annual feedback. Companies that rank in the top quartile of employee engagement are 23% more profitable than those in the bottom engagement. And what they put down to engagement was how you engage with your manager. Companies that give feedback constantly report turnover rates are at 14.9% lower than employees who receive no feedback. Organizations with recognition program have a 31% lower voluntary turnover, and 84% of highly engaged employees say the last time they went above and beyond work, they received recognition, compared to 25% of actively disengaged candidates. Only 50% of employees would strongly agree that they know what's expected of them. So it says the manager's not talking to them. And engagement is 15% higher and retention is 34% higher when employees have access to growth opportunities. Organizations with continuous performance processes are 39% better at attracting top talent and 44% better at retaining that talent. And 72 of the respondents to the questionnaire thought that their performance would improve if their manager would provide corrective feedback. 1 in 4, 26% of all people who supervise others have never received any management training, and a further 2/5, 39%, only received management training once they'd received or got to a certain level, not when they first became a manager. Just a third, 35% of UK managers enjoy regular training, and untrained managers may be highly qualified and skilled to do their current job, but in the findings, they said they are likely to be considered to be changing employers because they are no longer happy at work. So you've taken a really happy employee, made them a manager, not trained them, they're no longer unhappy at work. Only 54% of untrained managers, those who hadn't received any management training, say they love their current job, compared to 3/4, 77% of managers who say they receive regular management training once they enter that management culture. So it says there's a lot to be said about the managers and what we can do and how influential they are. Today we're joined by Heather and Paul. So they're really interested. Dave is over in Israel doing some charity work. He's safe and well. So he texted us this morning at about 4 o'clock this morning, woke us all up because of the things that's going on, but he's safe and well, which is always good. So let's kick off with some questions then. So in my experience, managers create the following: fear, drive, autonomy, excellence, attrition, support, followers, culture, toxic cultures, and the list goes on. So what should a manager be creating?
I'm going to hand this over to our HR expert to kick this one off.
Well, you know, I've been mulling this because that's really quite a list, Howard. It really is quite a list. And I've been mulling and thinking, well, how do you encapsulate what should a manager be creating? And what I came up with in the end, actually, is independence. So what I think a manager's job is to help their team to not need them anymore, to be self-motivated, to know their job, to understand their job, to not be dependent on their manager. So for me, independence is what managers should be doing, because then they are satisfied and in control of their daily working lives.
I think that's a brilliant summary. And I think, surprisingly, Heather and I agree on this point. So,
hang on a minute. Have you two been colluding?
It's a bit of a love in this.
It won't last.
It can't possibly last. I think Heather's completely right. Look, I always say to people who want to be managers that one of the primary drivers for them should be that they enjoy teaching. They like to be teachers, and it sounds a bit crass, doesn't it? You know, teaching people, being a teacher. Nothing wrong with teaching as a profession, by the way. My daughter's a teacher, but the fact is that this is what I believe great managers do. They put themselves in a place where they're passing on knowledge, information, expertise, and assisting and supporting people to get to a position where they can do the job as well as themselves, if not better. And in fact, I think that great managers are people who are very keen to have others take their jobs from them. You know, if you want my job, with great pleasure, have it, because I think they are aware of the fact that suppressing talent is always dangerous and will lead to people leaving, and they encourage people to move up the ladder, to become more proficient and better at their work to the extent that they could do their job. And that tends to create better opportunities or promotional opportunities anyway for the manager that's cultivated that learning culture. I also think it's about creating a family unit. I think it's about creating security for people, making people feel supported, safe. It's about providing praise, recognition, if anything, and I'll say this very quietly, it's about being a great parent. So that to me is what a great manager is all about.
So it's interesting. Even though I write the questions, I still think I've got to then answer the questions. So I write them, and sometimes, oh my goodness, what am I going to say to that? So it was interesting. So I completely agree with what both you're saying there. But I think sort of managers come in different formats, don't they? You got the micro manager, you got the mushroom manager, the manager that likes to keep everybody in the dark, haven't you? You've got the telling manager, you've got all sorts of different types of managers. And I think, you know, when we've done management training, that, you know, trying to remove the word manager and put it into the word coach becomes a very different conversation. I think what you two are talking about, creating autonomy, you know, that parent, it's about coaching your people and putting your people at the forefront of everything that you do. And I think that's, to me, is any great manager that I've had, you know, it's about how they make you feel. It's about how they make you perform. So they are the catalyst to your performance. And obviously, if you're a micromanager or a mushroom manager or a telling manager, etc., you can be the catalyst to performance, but it's good performance or bad performance is what's going on. And what I think that good manager is about, it's about creating that family unit. If you're going to use the parent, I'd like to sort of correct you create that really tight-knit tribe where, you know, everyone's in it for each other, and that's what the manager is good, the person that creates that type of environment. And I think it's important to remember that, you know, to do that, you've got to understand your people. So I think a manager is someone who is, you know, what they should be creating is an environment where listening is the priority for what's going on. And
sorry, Howard, I also think it's about creating a winning culture. It's about getting people to believe that anything is possible, isn't it? I think it's getting people to believe in themselves, to believe in each other.
Do you know what I think that's a byproduct, Paul, of what we're trying to do. I think that's a genuine byproduct. If you look at any sporting team that's failing, and then you put a different manager that changed the culture and they suddenly become a winning team, you know, it's about what the manager does and what they create, and it's about creating that safe space. And I think it is about creating that space for people to express themselves without fear of retribution and about fear. And, you know, all of that thing comes from coaching rather than managing, telling, demanding, commanding, etc. So, you know, that's the thing that we start to think about when the manager is the catalyst for the performance. And some of the stats that I read out, you know, lower volumes of turnover, higher volumes of productivity, etc. But then you look at how many managers haven't ever received any training. It's a wonder why, you know, teams fail and businesses fail. So there's the question: why is a formal training strategy and an at-desk mentoring culture key to a manager's success?
You know, there's if I can, I want to use an example for this with a smallish recruitment business that I started working with. I won't name them, but they are just at the size where they know that the founders can't continue to keep managing everybody. And what they did really interestingly is obviously genius, invite me to come in, but what the reason is because they want to build a training strategy. They want to build a management team, and they're not, so many of our businesses in our industry just do this kind of organically with what's in front of them. And what they did was they said they're only a small business, but they put all of the people in the business who had expressed any interest in management in a session with me, where all we did was just debate what being a manager was, what the role was. And we just started with that. Do you know what it is you're taking on? Do you understand what's involved? This is the support you're going to get in order to do it. So that rather than just organically and accidentally ending up with a management structure, they deliberately got people involved in, well, I'm going to actively choose this as my career path. I know my organisation is going to support me. I understand what the role is and the opportunity and the challenges. And it's been fascinating to spend the last year working with this business. Once the kind of 3 people put their hands up and said, genuinely, I want to do it, then building that strategy and building that coaching culture, and watching it work and watching the business grow. So I think, it's about really understanding what you're taking on and really understanding what the role is and the support you're going to. Those stats that you said at the beginning, Howard, were fascinating and terrifying. That people don't have that support and just, especially in our industry, accidentally become managers.
It's interesting. I've had the same experience. I've got 2 clients who have engaged me to do management training, so 5-day course spread over 2 or 3 months and what have you, and then they sent me a list of 1 or 2 people to go on it. And so I've rang them all up and said, so who else is showing management experience or management tendencies, etc. And they went, what do you mean? I said, well, let's put more people on the shop floor that have that type of mindset, and let's train them to coach, mentor, and develop their staff. And they never even thought about it that way. So rather than having 2 or 3, both companies, we ended up having between 8 and 10 people on the course. And after the courses, they all came back and said, oh my God, what a difference it's made. I'm now with both these companies on the second tranche of people going through those management training sessions. So the second set of people, and they're going, oh my God, I now see what so-and-so did and how he was doing it. And I now see the effect and how it worked. And I said,
and you moved into this conscious management, don't you? Instead of just accidental management.
And what was really interesting when we talked about it, I said, and what's it done for harmony and performance? And they said, well, performance has gone through the roof. I said, why is that? I said, because as managers, we don't have to spend so much time managing because we're creating this self-fulfilling management operation. And as the team, they feel they have the autonomy to make mistakes without a problem, and therefore everyone is absolutely pushing forward, and they've got their sales have gone through the roof. And I'm not saying that's all down to the management, but it's down to having more people on the floor that control and understand what a manager should be doing, rather than just putting, here's 3 people that are going to become managers. And it was interesting, the people that said they were going to become managers in one of the companies, 2 of them after the course said, you made the course so obvious to us that it's not our skill set. We want to go down the single selling route, and we're happy to do that. And we understand now why we failed in the past at being managers. And I think that's the big thing, that you have to give the people the opportunity to fail, but without putting them on the shop floor. So going through that training, they understood it just wasn't for them.
No, I mean,
because we shoehorn people into the role, don't we? Sorry, Paul.
We do. No. I was about to say exactly that. One of the things we're guilty of in our industry consistently is that we promote people that are top billers, people that consistently perform well as consultants, and then the next management opportunity that comes along, they're given that chance. And what we know is that it's a different skill set. And Howard's made the point, being a great biller is. I think someone's about to knock on my door. Being a great
is it the HMRC, Paul? Is it the HMRC coming to get you at last?
It's someone at my door. So being a great biller is something that's very, very different to being a great manager. And I think you're right to define what's the difference. We are very happy to have great billers working for our organizations who don't really particularly want to be managers, but equally very often the best managers are not necessarily the best billers, because it's a completely different set of skills. So it's an entirely different situation. I'm going to get off because I've got to go and get the door. Go on, I'll let you crack on.
So while you answer the door,
Howard,
Paul,
and I.
yeah. So Paul's only fan had appeared at his door, and he'll be running away very quickly. So here's a question then. And I think this is the bit that I want. I've started to work with some of the people who have been going through these management courses. And this is the bit where I started at and then went back to, because I thought, is it right? Is it wrong? So the question is, if your manager left your business, what would they leave behind? And this is where I've been working with my manager and say, right, okay, I'm going to put you into all the way through the manager. I want you to tell me what you want to leave behind when you move from being a manager to the next role up. What is it that you want to leave behind?
That's really interesting, Howard, because I think you're talking about legacy there. But when I didn't read the question like that, having not discussed it with you beforehand, and my perception of the question actually was what they leave behind is an opportunity. So, for me, when somebody moves on, we're often losing a biller, and we worry very much about the hole they're leaving, but actually it's a real opportunity. And if you've done things to identify and make sure people understand what the role of a manager is, and you've done some succession planning, which I know we're going to talk about later, but what you then have is the opportunity to try something different in the organization and to promote someone else and to develop someone else's skills. So that was the perception. I hadn't thought about legacy. So I'll let you answer your own question in terms of legacy.
So to me, it's not such about legacy. And I think managers come in very different sort of ways, and good managers. So you get great managers, but when they leave, then the team implodes because they haven't actually created a succession plan.
Yeah, then they're not a good manager, though, are they?
But there's so many leaders of great companies that when they leave, then the company has all sorts of problems because they are the focal point. And I think that, to me, was what I wanted to get across to the people that was going through those courses, that I want you to leave behind a structure that can grow and blossom. So your job is to make yourself redundant.
Completely.
But to make yourself redundant, you've got to make sure that what you're leaving behind is worthy of, growth, because you've left people in charge and you've developed that succession plan, and therefore you've got more people on the ground who have got that understanding of how the business should grow, what the business should grow like. And I think that, to me, is the biggest sign off of a great manager, is what have you left behind? Because if you've just left a group of people who now become leaderless and rudderless, etc., then you're right, you're not a great manager. You're great at being managing process and getting people to perform, but you haven't created a culture that is then self-fulfilling and self-prophetizing and growing. So to me, what you leave behind is really important. And that's the bit where I now start my management training, because I want to see what their growth has to be to get to that point where they think they're leaving something really good behind, rather than being the focal point. I am the champion of everything, and therefore everything looks at me. It's how do you promote everything else below that? So when you leave, what are you leaving?
Yeah,
what was the question?
Yeah. Too late, Paul. Too
late, Paul. We're not going to allow you to answer that. The question was, if a manager left your business,
yes,
what would they leave behind?
A sandwich box. I would think. What you're hoping that they leave behind is a very strong legacy. People that have been well trained and coached, that are prepared to take on their role. And I would say that would be the legacy of a great manager. But was there a sinister point to this question?
There was no sinister point at all to it, Paul. There's never any sinister points to any of the questions that I asked, Paul, as well,
Debatable.
So let's then move that on. Okay. So then you mentioned the word there, and I mentioned it as well, succession planning. Okay. So succession planning for all managers is critical. So what should a manager's legacy look like? So if we look at that succession planning, see what should that legacy look like if we're talking legacy?
Well, I think it's what Paul just described, really, isn't it? It's a team who are completely capable of driving their business, their desks, their team forward in the absence of the manager. A good manager's legacy is a self-managing team. It's independent consultants who understand the job and are motivated and the event effectively don't need them. So that, you know, that's what it is for me. And you know, we're sometimes critical of what we do in this industry, but actually on this front, some of this stuff, we are so good at managing people in some parts of our industry. We really are. I remember coaching somebody who worked in a very, very large public sector civil service department. And we were talking, she was really struggling with, I mean, she had kind of like, you know, 150 people in the department, really struggling with moving their KPIs forward and their performance. And I was like, okay, describe to me then your kind of performance management cycle. And they reviewed KPI progress twice a year. And that was normal, you know, whereas we do this stuff weekly, daily, monthly, you know, it at that really being on top of performance as managers, that is not common across organizations at all. And most people in recruitment, we've grown up in recruitment, we've worked in it, we've always worked in it, and we don't know what it's like somewhere else, and this is sort of normal for us. Honestly, it's not. It really isn't.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point. I think this point about succession planning, though, is something that many businesses need to focus upon, because we often find, and I was making this point just before the doorbell rang, that people get promoted because they are genuinely good at what they do. And as you said, Heather, it's not always the case that there's a delineation between great consulting performance and great management or potential great management skill sets. And I think that when we do promote people, very often there's limited amounts of support given to the people that are, if you like, next in line. We're not preparing for the prospect that somebody might actually leave the business or get promoted, better still. And we're not necessarily putting energies and time and support, coaching into that next level of people. Because of course, and you know this only too well, Heather, you know, it's about once people are promoted, you want them to be in a position where they've already been coached to succeed, rather than place them in a position where they get promoted and now we're going to start coaching them and place them in a position where they're probably going to struggle or fail in the first instance. So I think it's about identifying, and Howard, you were saying this, identifying people that even in the early stages of their careers are demonstrating some leadership management skills, capability. There's something about them, even a sort of instinct that you have that they are potential leaders for the future, and then putting time and energy into developing those people. And even if they leave your business before they have the opportunity to progress, the legacy for that, I would suggest, is that they will look back at their formative years in the industry and regard their opportunity to work for you as a person starting out in their careers in recruitment as a wonderful experience. You set them on the path. You were able to get them in that right direction. It's not always the case that they're going to stay a long time with you, but it is about enabling them to have the best possible experience, the best possible career opportunities whilst they're working for you.
So I'm going to agree and disagree to something that Heather said there, because I do think we're great at certain parts of management, but I think the bit that we got to separate out, there's a big difference between managing the person and managing the process. And I think lots of companies think they've got a really good management process because they're great at smashing KPIs and great at driving people to hit KPIs rather than actually managing the person. They're managing a process. And I think there's a very big difference. And I think we've got to look at the difference between those two types of culture, because what in that succession planning is you want a culture that's going to grow and grow. And where we see people who are dictatorial on driving KPIs and they think they're good at driving KPIs, what we see is high turnover of staff and lots of people being churned out, and they then go and do the same everywhere where they go, where those that have got a stable workforce are really good at managing the people, and there has to be a crossover between both to make it work. So to me, that's succession planning, and what's critical for a manager is that legacy is they should have people who can step in and be better than what they were. So you're training people to be better at managing people, not at managing the actual process. The process should be there, but it's how you manage that. So, you know, what you're doing, why you're doing it, why have you failed management structure, why haven't you hit your KPIs, is how have you got to this situation? How can we help? How can you change this? How can you do that? And I think it's about turning from one to the other and making it absolutely right. And lots of people are scared of KPIs, where I think the management KPI is about your kept promise index. So whatever you're promising to your people, are you keeping that index and you're keeping that promise that you've given? And likewise, when they're coming and telling you what they're going to achieve, are they keeping their promise and their index? And therefore you start to drive and develop that. So I think we've got to work that there are more than just one KPI in this world. It's not about key performance indicators. To me, on a management, it's about your kept promise index, how you're going to help develop and drive that person and create loyalty across the team, rather than are you just going to be the manager that's great at driving people to exhaustion because you're making them hit every KPI in the world irrespectively.
I like that. Kept promise indicator. Is that what you called it?
Kept promise index, Paul.
Index. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Very good. That's one I'm going to steal. I'm going to own that one now, Howard. Got nothing to do with you. Very good.
As always, Paul, everything you take comes from
An
me.
education
As well, you know. Of course it is. Of course it is. So here's a question then. Okay, we talked, or some of the stats we talked about. You know, why we talked about why companies, why don't they invest in their managers? And you talked a bit there, Paul, about investing in before they become that manager and developing that. And that's what we're seeing. And that's what we're driving at and stuff like that. So we know that budgets for management training in most recruitment agencies is almost non-existent. So why is it one of the most important budgets that every company should have?
Oh God, Heather, you kick this off. I mean, there's so much we could say. Heather, do you want to kick it off?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Paul.
It's all right.
Yeah, it's fundamental, right? You can't expect people to do a job as important as a manager's job that has such far-reaching implications without giving them the tools to do it. You know, the idea that we all instinctively know how to manage other people is just nonsense, isn't it? I mean, it amuses me that we would assume like somebody is a great biller and therefore by osmosis they learn to be a great manager.
Exactly.
It just doesn't happen like that. You have to give people the tools to do the job properly. They might do it well without the tools, but it will be by accident, and the number of times they'll do it well will be small. You know, they might be lucky in that they've got team members who respond to their style, so they don't need to understand different styles. Or, but yeah, you've got to give people the tools to do the job. Not least because if they are out of their depth and stop enjoying it, you lose the big biller you promoted because you're putting them in a job they're patently not suited for.
Exactly.
So, you know, for me, this is just obvious.
You're absolutely right. And I think we're always on this journey. Who amongst us can genuinely say that they're the finished product? You know, whether you've been managing for 2 minutes, 2 years, 30, 50 years, and so forth. I mean, none of us have ever reached a stage where we genuinely think we've absolutely are on top of it. We're always learning, always. It's never a point where you think that your knowledge is completed. It isn't. And this point about budget for management training doesn't just apply, as we're kind of inferring here, for newer people or people that haven't yet made management level. It's absolutely critical for the people that are in it, whether they've, as I said, been doing it for a short period of time, or they're owners of businesses who need support and development, and recognize that. And frankly, you know, I think one of the things that I'm always very aware of is how, and you guys will support me on this point with the clients that we work with, how humble the owners and the directors are of the businesses we work with, because they are prepared to take on advice and support and guidance and so forth. And yet they could say, well, I own a business, you know, I've been doing it for X period of time. I know exactly what I'm doing. They don't do that. They don't do that. And I think it's demonstrated by the fact that their businesses continue to improve and evolve. And that's, I think, reflective of the fact that they themselves remain humble and open-minded. And you want that attitude, that yearning for new knowledge to pervade throughout your business. You want people to consistently feel, no matter where they are in their careers, that there's still so much to learn, or even be reminded of. You know, very often when we speak to people and we say, you might want to consider doing this, that, and the other, they say, oh, you know, you've just reminded me, we used to do that, we don't do that anymore. And so I think very often that's the situation. It's my doorbell again. Can you believe it? So I'm going to pass this to you, Howard, whilst I now have to run down and open the door again. Where's Tracy when you need her?
I don't know. It's just, not professional, Paul. You need some training on that door. I think, I rolled some stats out and I was trying to find them and I can't find them. I don't like to roll the same stats out constantly week in, week out. There was a stat that I rolled out sort of last year on management, on training budgets. It was all about training budgets. And it said those companies that invest less than 10% of their training budget on management tend to have a negative impact on their business. But the companies that invest more than 50%, and this was the bit that really intrigued me, that invest more than 50% of their training budget on management training had an increase of around about 20% of productivity right across the board. And it was that sort of one stat there that sort of said, actually, these people are the true catalyst to business. So they spend all your money training your new people to get up and running, etc. But you haven't trained your managers to coach, develop, and mentor them, then these people are going to fall by the wayside. So I think it's really important then we start to look at when we work with companies day in, day out, and we're looking at setting budgets and we're looking at setting training programs for onboarding, etc., etc. We should be thinking about actually the first person that we need to train is the manager, to train the manager to be able to train the people and develop and coach the people, whether that be a formal train the trainer or a formal management training course, etc. Because they're the person that's closest to the coalface that's helping these people. And I think that's sometimes that we forget, the further up the chain that you get, you sometimes forget how much influence that you have down there. And the fact that we've never set a budget, because we just think, as you said there, Heather, by osmosis, people are going to naturally fall into becoming a great manager because they were a great biller and wonder why. And you mentioned it there, Paul, and there was a post on LinkedIn a couple of months ago now, actually, about a guy who grew a nice business, 100 million turnover business. And he listed some of the top 3 things that he would change if he did it again. And one of the things he said was promoting his big billers into managers was the biggest mistake that he ever made, because he never trained them. He lost his big biller, as Heather said, and he also lost lots of other billers that was there. And he said the other thing that he'd change is he would then put management structures in so far down the business that everyone's getting onto that management ladder earlier, irrespective of whether they're managing or not, because they can display those management skill sets and you start to see the ones that will step up and don't step up. So that budget would become a huge budget as part of his training budget to develop the managers of the future as well as the managers of today and help to deliver that. So I think, to me, that's what I would do with my budget. I'd look at training my managers and then look at who they're training and start to develop it from there.
But Howard, let's not call it a budget. Let's call it an investment, because this isn't money that you're spending for the sake of spending money. This is investing in the future of the people that work with you and investing in the future prosperity of your organization. Any money you spend on developing your people, helping them to become the best, to use the cliche, the best they can be, is going to come back to you with dividends down the line for an absolute certainty, not just in terms of profitability, but in terms of the feedback you receive from your clients, from your candidates, the reputation of your organization, and so forth. So, it's not always, of course, that in turn reflects on the profitability, but, this is an investment, and an investment is all about putting energy and indeed resources into people to help them to grow, but also, of course, it benefits your organization. This is not money spent, this is money gained in any organization.
So it's interesting, isn't it? I remember setting up a training program for my managers when I was at Computer People. And I went to the management, the training department, and we created what we call, mini courses. So we created all these little mini courses, and we created a little suitcase to give to the managers, and we trained them how to manage. And my edict was, every Wednesday, you need to spend a lunchtime training one of these. And we had about 20, 30 courses that we'd written for them, and train your staff. And it was really interesting. Those that did it week in, week out and made it habit had lower turnover and higher growth than those offices that didn't. So it understood the manager that wants to train and develop his people and look after his people, and how she did that constantly over and over again. They were the offices that grew. And it was really interesting watching the difference and watching what was going on. And then when the managers that were failing, I said, well, what can we do? I go, right, go sit with this manager and you tell me what the difference is. And the only difference was that they were actually investing in your people. So that comment there, Paul, investment, is a really interesting comment. And maybe we should change that word budget to, it's the investment. What's the investment capital that we're going to expend this year on training?
I really like the fact that you could measure the difference, because I know instinctively, I know that's right. But the fact that you had the data to be able to demonstrate, that's really powerful, Howard. I like that a lot.
And it is, if you're investing that type of money, you've got to be able to measure the return on investment that you get.
It's so difficult to do, isn't it? So
it is so difficult to do, but you've got to put it down to that continuity and getting everybody on the same page, doing the same thing, uniform, getting everyone to create the same habits that we know works in recruitment, and getting them to do it, getting the manager to coach, mentor, cajole people and get them to feel safe that they can do that, rather than you get on the phone. And that's not management, but that's what people think is. So here's a question then. We've talked about quite a lot of this. When a new starter or a junior member of a team looks above, what should they see?
Well, I think they should see, when they look to the person that's their manager, I think they should be looking to someone they consider to be a role model, somebody that exhibits the behaviors and values that are also in cohesion, as it were, with the overall company's behaviors and values. They should be looking at someone that is inspiring, an inspirational figure. I think they need to see someone that's resilient, and takes the knocks and the good times with the same sort of attitude, the same sort of cheery attitude, that they seem to be indomitable. And as I've said already, I think they look to someone that will be their mentor or teacher, somebody that is going to give them knowledge, experience, support, time to enable them to improve. And I think above all, and I've said this already, but I think you're looking for somebody to create a great environment to work in. You know, it's an enjoyable experience. It comes from the leader, comes from that person. They're very quick to let you know when you're doing great things. But when you're not, they have a method of, in a very subtle way, of getting you back online. It's someone that has an influence on you, not just at work, but someone you'll remember for many, many years, long after you've stopped working together. And I think that's why I use the analogy of a teacher. People always remember great teachers.
You know, it's really what occurs to me, because I think that's a brilliant list, Paul, and I think that's all true. But I also think that's quite a terrifying list.
Yes, it
Somebody
is.
going into management for the first time. It's quite a scary thing, isn't it, to say you're going to be responsible for all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think if we started with mentor, the rest comes from that.
Comes from experience. Yeah, and I think it is, you're right, you're building these blocks. I mean, nobody is capable of doing all the things I listed just there from day one. And in fact, I would argue that, 40 odd years later, since I started being a manager, I still aspire to do some of the things I listed as well as I can. I think you're always attempting to improve in every area. There's never, as I said earlier, there's never a point when you think I've arrived. There's nothing I can learn. So, I mean, it is an ongoing process. It's a total journey. And some of the things that you need to exhibit and provide to people comes from, frankly, the hard knocks that you experience as you go through life, both professionally and personally. In other words, the things that give you wisdom. In order to be a great leader, a great manager, very often, you've got to experience the bad times. You have to understand what it feels like not to win, to fail sometimes. I think those are the things that end up making you the leader that you hope to be. It's not a bowl of cherries. Life and professional life is not a bowl of cherries. You can't have that when you first become a manager. That's something that happens over a period of time. But I'll come back to my point about resilience. Resilience is something that's inbuilt in most people. I mean, it's part of your DNA, if you like. It's how you were brought up. And that's something that you need, I think, needs to be consistent. It needs to be very evident in managers, even from day one, that they have that fighting spirit, they have that attitude that nothing's going to push them back, nothing's going to defeat them, even without the experience. Just that ability to keep going, keep going, get pushed down and get back up again, keep doing it. And, when you work with people with that attitude, that in itself is inspiring.
He'll take a breath in a moment, Heather.
Yeah, he will.
Sarcasm. That's what we get. Sarcasm.
Hey,
Sarcasm.
Howard, I'll get the bloke in the van outside to ring the doorbell again in a minute.
Oh, if anyone rings that, I'm going to. I've done with answering the door now.
Gordon Kay's got his hand up, so I'm not sure whether you've got your hand up because you want to ask a question, Gordon, or you've got your hand up because you've slightly hit the button by mistake from there. So if you want to ask a question, drop it in the webinar chat box, and then we can respond to the question and answer the question. So our last question of the day then, which is always going to be the biggest question that we can ask to a certain point, is when building your management structure, what should you be building?
Crikey, Howard.
Just thought I'd throw it out there, Now we're all hoping that Gordon has a question, so we don't have to ask this one.
Yeah. So what should you be building? You should be building a culture that supports mentoring and right back to the thing at the beginning, independence. So your managers should be creating a culture where they are no longer required, right? Yeah. So they have got somebody else in the team that will take over from them. So, and with full transparency. So nobody should be in the job without understanding what the job is and being given the tools to do the job. But ultimately, all of the things that we've talked about come down to creating the right culture of mentoring. And that's what people should be looking up to see, I think, in answer to the previous question. You want to see a mentor.
Yeah. And I'm going to approach this question from a slightly different perspective.
Go and answer the door.
Oh, gosh. So I've got 10-minute respite before Amazon turn up again. So, I mean, for me, it's a slightly different angle in that I think that you want layers of management. Too often we build our management structure on the shoulders of just a few people. And we've talked about succession planning. It's making sure that you have different layers, different levels of management, so that in the event, almost inevitably, that one of your valued people leaves you and it could be through retirement, not necessarily that they want to leave the business. You've got people ready to step up. You've got layers. You're not placing the management of the business on one or two shoulders. So it's creating the organizational structure and creating the strength through various layers and giving people opportunities to gain promotion, not big leaps, but mini steps moving in the right direction. Too often we want people to go from this level to this level, and that's a big jump. Create steps in between so that we're guiding people towards the next level, and it's not such a stretch that it's going to make most people fail.
So I think I go back and I look at sort of there when I sort of thought about this question quite heavily, what should I see? I want to see something that I can aspire to and go beyond. And I think what a lot of managers create is that purposeful glass ceiling where they don't want people coming past them for whatever reason because they're fearful of that. And you mentioned it earlier, Paul, about you should be proud that your people go past you if you've got people that you're the catalyst for them to live their dream. And I think that's the bit, to me, what I should see is someone that inspires me, someone that wants me to step up, someone that is going to help me to step up. And as you're looking up, you should be able to see that reaching hand coming down, helping you get up, rather than seeing the sole of someone's shoe pushing you back down, because that's what happens with a lot of places, that you look up and all you see is a big boot above your head rather than a nice helping hand pulling you up. So I think when I think about creating and building a management structure, it's about creating that chain of hands, helping everybody up the ladder, rather than creating individual glass ceilings as you get further and further up the chain. And I think that's the thing that I want to try and create, and that's the thing that I try promote through the training that we do and give to clients, is that, you know, it's about creating that succession plan where it is a fluid succession plan and everyone can see that opportunity, and everyone sees the person above as the catalyst for that opportunity to be fulfilled.
Well said.
Nicely put.
Well said. Good ending, Howard. Very good.
Good ending. Ding dong. Sorry, is that your doorbell again, Paul? So next week was meant to be the expo, and as we know, it's changed the week after. So we are going to run a webinar next week. And so we're going to sort of put a webinar in. So this is the end of this series of webinars. So we're going to start a whole new series of webinars. And I thought, from what we're talking about now and looking at how the market's going and growing, okay, that we need to start to sort of look at how we build on what we've talked about today. So next week, what we're going to look at is, how do you take a big biller into that first rung of management without losing your big biller and without destroying your management culture? How do we take that across? So I think, again, we're going to keep this theme going to a certain level, because I think a lot of businesses now at that point where they've got people that they want to promote, or they've got people already in that position that need training. So how do we create that big biller into a really good manager? Or what do we do with that big biller if they don't suit management from there? So, ladies and gents, that's it for today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm assuming Gordon just pressed the button by mistake and put his hand up by mistake, and that's not a problem. Okay, if anyone's got any questions, fire away. If not, we shall see you all next week, and have a super week, and hope it doesn't snow where you are.
Take care, everybody. All the best.
Catch you later. Bye.